Star, why don't you get to your feet? We're going to sing this morning of our God's great love. He surrounds us, doesn't let us go. Would you worship with us this morning?
Before I call, before I ever cry, you answer me from where the thunder hides. I cannot run this heart I'm tethered to. With every step I collide with you. Come on. Like a tidal wave crashing over me, rushing in to meet me here. Your love is fierce, like a hurricane that I can't escape, tearing through the atmosphere. Your love is fierce. You cannot fail. The only thing I found is through it all, you never let me down. You don't hold back, relentless in pursuit. At every turn, I come face to face with you. Like a tidal wave, come on. Like a tidal wave, crashing over me, rushing in to meet me here. Your love is fierce, like a hurricane that I can't escape, tearing through the atmosphere. Your love is fierce. You chase me down, and you seek me out. You chase me down, you seek me out. How could I be lost when you have called me found? You chase me down, yeah. You seek me out. How could I be lost when you have called me found? You chase me down, you seek me out. How could I be lost when you have called me found? Come on, like a tidal wave. Come on. Like a tidal wave, crashing over me, rushing in to meet me here. Your love is fierce, like a hurricane that I can't escape, tearing through the atmosphere. Your love is fierce. Your love is fierce. Oh, you surround me. Your love is fierce.
Give him a shout of praise this morning. God, we love you. We trust you.
your name. We glorify your name. We glorify your name in all the earth. Church, sing this out. Worship with us. We glorify your name. We glorify your name. We glorify your name in all the earth. The highest praise is yours. The highest praise is yours. The highest praise is yours in all the earth. Come on, sing this out. Highest praise is yours. The highest praise is yours. The highest praise is yours in all the earth. You are seated on a throne of praise. Unto you alone, let our voices raise. You are seated on a throne of praise. Unto you alone, let our voices raise. We glorify your name. We glorify your name. We glorify your name in all the earth.
Good morning. Welcome to North Star Church. My name is Larry. If I could ask you to do us a favor, we have a great challenge, which is more people than we have seats. So if you'll be a favor, if there is an empty seat toward your middle, will you scooch? Is that a word, Mike? Will you scooch in toward the middle and make room? Hey, here's something else. Normally at North Star, we shake hands and all that kind of stuff, and we introduce ourselves to the person beside us. But how many of y'all know it's flu season, all right? So here's what we're going to do. Can we do knuckles instead, like pound it out and then like blow it up, right? Can we do that? So turn to your neighbor, pound it out, and let's blow up the flu, and then you may have a seat. All right. I see the flu being blown out of the building. Hey, thanks for being here this morning at North Star Church. We exist to help people find their way home, and that might mean finding a church home here at North Star, and we'd love to have you if you don't have a church home. But more importantly, it means finding a home in a personal relationship with God through his son, Jesus Christ. And so if you've never met Christ, my prayer today, our prayer today, is that you would discover what it means to know Christ personally and the difference that he can make today and in eternity. If you're a first-time guest, thanks for being with us. We know there are lots of places you could be on a rainy January morning, like Walmart is still open, but you chose to be here, and so we are grateful. If you'll do us a favor, on your worship guide, there is a tear-off portion. If you'll just fill that out in a few minutes and stick that in the offering baskets when they're passed. It will help us get to know you a little better and help you find a way where you can connect. I'm going to ask the ushers to begin to make their way forward. And while they're making their way forward, man, we love to celebrate the ways that you guys are giving and the way that God is using your giving. As an example, yesterday on this campus, over 200 men showed up for a men's locker room talk. Jason Romano challenged guys about forgiveness and unforgiveness and what God has to say about that, and also having meaningful men relationships. And events like that would not be possible without your giving. And so we thank you for that. I'm going to ask the ushers to go ahead and begin to give. Another special event coming up here at North Star is a Night to Shine. And some of you guys remember that. On February 9th, we are hosting a Night to Shine. It's an event put on by the Tim Tebow Foundation. It is a prom night event for people who are older, 14 years or older. And here's what's really cool. There are lots of really cool things about it. But one thing is we needed 350 volunteers to host that event. And all the slots are full. You guys have stepped up to the plate again. And so we don't need more volunteers. But what we are still collecting are donations for prom dresses, because y'all know they don't fit anymore. Anyway, for prom dresses, we need some dress shoes, and we need some costume jewelry. So if you have some of that you'd like to donate for that special event, you can drop those off at the church office tomorrow and Tuesday between 9 and 5. Another really great thing that's happening is our next community big give is happening. We are partnering with Kennesaw Mountain High School for a dance for special needs. And as part of that, we are collecting cases of 8-ounce water, and we're collecting cookies. So the next 2 Sundays, you can bring those in. If you're making homemade cookies, I like snickerdoodles, warm snickerdoodles, but you can bring those in on February the 11th if you're making homemade cookies. Today, we're continuing our series called Unshakeable, which has been a great series about real life, and some of you know what it's like to have life shake you. Today, we're going to take a look at what it means to be persecuted. Some of you have been bullied, harassed for your faith here in Ackworth, Kennesaw, and around the world. And so if you'll take out a worship guide, pen, something to write with, in just a few minutes, Pastor Mike is going to come and open God's Word. And I'm excited to hear what God has to say through him today. So thanks for being here.
Well, good morning, everybody. For those of you I do not know, my name is Mike. It's an honor to welcome you here to North Star for this 4th week in the series called Unshakeable. We don't know in life when something's going to show up unannounced that we're unprepared for, and it's going to rock us, and it's going to shake us. It may be anxiety. It may be some things, some anxiousness that you're going through in life. Maybe that. It may be a time that you walk through of adversity. Maybe it's a health scare, maybe it's something in your family, but there's some adversity that visits your home and it shakes you to the core. It isn't a question of will it show up, it's a question of when it's going to show up and how are we going to be prepared for it. And then there's times, like we talked about last week, that tragedy shows up at our door. How many of y'all enjoyed the Barrick family? Did you enjoy them last week? Weren't they amazing? Had so many emails about that this week. And tragedy showed up in their life, unannounced, just another night, going out to grab food, to head home with some friends, and their world, in fact, we didn't talk about this last week, but they were in Atlanta last week to visit her brain doctor, and they were there for the week. She's still working on her memory and all that kind of stuff. It's tragedy. Paul didn't want this church, nor did he want us to feel like, well, nobody else has ever felt this before. Nobody else has ever gone through this before. If you got your Bibles this morning, I want you to turn to 2 Corinthians chapter 4. If you got your North Star Church app, North Star Church Georgia, you can look it up, download it. It will be, all the notes are in there. You also have your Bible or your phone. You can look up the verse. 2 Corinthians chapter 4. Paul's writing this letter to the church at Corinth. Here's why he wrote them. He wrote them because he knew that they were going to experience things they didn't see coming. They're new believers. They're new to the faith. They're all excited about what God's doing. They're all excited about what God's up to. And he knew, Paul knew, they were going to create some waves and they were going to face some things. He knew that this whole gospel, see, the guy writing this was a guy originally named Saul. Saul wasn't a good guy. Saul was a bad guy. Saul has a major conversion experience, and then he goes on the path of planting churches, sharing the gospel, making a difference. And he wanted these new believers who were a little starry-eyed about their faith to understand not everybody's going to like it that you're a follower of Jesus. See, we know people now as Christians. Back then they were known as people of the way, meaning they have chosen to follow the way. Jesus said he was the way, the truth, and life. They've set themselves apart. And he writes these words to them. 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verse number 7. He said, but we have this treasure in jars of clay, meaning that it's not, it's destructible. We have this treasure in jars of clay to show the surpassing power belongs to God and not to who? This story isn't about you. If you think this whole life's about you, you've missed all of the gospel. Jesus did not leave you here for you. He left you here for him. Paul is wanting this church to know, yeah, you're a destructible, perishable existence. You're in jars of clay. But he left you in that to show that the surpassing power belongs to God, not to us. He can do more through you than you can ever accomplish with your own life by itself. And he kept writing, and he said this, we're afflicted in every way, but we're not crushed. We're perplexed, but not driven to, what's the word there? See, despair comes when we think there's no hope. Despair comes when we go, I don't see a reason for this. I don't understand this. I don't know why I'm going through this. That creates despair. But when we know there's a bigger story at play, we don't have to be in despair because we know that God is up to something. It really is like we're in this massive story being written across the ages. Everybody look at me. And God wrote you into the script. He wrote you in. You got a piece of the story. Don't let it drive you to despair because God is up to something. And then he goes on and he says this, we're afflicted in every way and then we're persecuted, but we're not forsaken. We're struck down, but not destroyed. It's interesting you hit this with him because he wanted them to understand not everybody's going to like that you're a believer. Not everybody's going to give you a pat on the back and give you an attaboy that you say, hey, I am now a follower of Jesus Christ. People aren't going to line up and go, well, that is awesome. Congratulations. He wanted them to know that they were going to face persecution, and they did face persecution. He wanted them to understand that this faith may cost them something. So you go, all right, we live in America. We live in Kennesaw, Akron, Georgia. What does it mean to be persecuted? What does that even mean? So write down a couple things. Ready? Pen, pencil, something to write with, or you got your phone, you can type it in. Here's types of persecution. Number one, maybe people avoid us. Maybe people avoid you. You know, you used to live one way. This is sort of the North Star story. Let me fill you in on the North Star story. I used to be like this, and man, life had a hard time, and I started coming back to church, and I changed. Now I live like this. Well, maybe not all your friends line up with you living differently than they do, and they may avoid you. They may go do things and not ask you to come. They may have conversations about things you don't need to be involved in and you're not privy to. People may avoid you. They may avoid you because you smell. I don't know, or they just may avoid you or they don't like you. But many times they may avoid you because your new faith walk and them doesn't line up. But people may avoid you. You know, that was hard growing up, but you know when it was even harder? It was harder watching that happen to my children. It was harder watching them not fit in relationships maybe because of what I do. Sometimes that's a persecution, but people may avoid us. But then it goes a little level deeper. Sometimes people will accuse us. I was talking to a young sales guy here. See, I got an easy job. My job is to pastor. So I hang out in an office all week with people that believe like I do. All right? If they work on a church staff and don't believe like I do, that would be bad. All right? And so they all believe like me and they all think the same things. It's a pretty easy environment. That's not that way for many of you that go into the workplace and you go into places. And he was facing the dilemma of every guy on his sales team, when they traveled, they would go to a strip club at the end of the evening with clients. And he didn't know what to do. And when he chose to not go and go back to his hotel, you think you're better than us? You think you're a better Christian than us? Or your faith's different than us? And that's accusing. I mean, it's what that is. Many of you may be on a college team, and one group on the team goes this way, and you choose not to go that way. Well, you just think you're better than us. The words in our society that are used are bigoted, homophobe, because this is what I think God teaches. Well, you think because of what you believe you're better. That's accusing. That's what that may look like in our society. You may have been through that before. But you go, is it worth it? Well, yeah. It's worth it. And in fact, it shouldn't be a surprise. Number 3, sometimes people will abuse us. We don't see that as much in our world, in the world we live in. We live in a bubble here. I believe, and see if y'all agree with me, I believe we live in the 2 greatest communities in America in Kennesaw and Acworth. Do y'all agree with that? This place is unbelievable. It's unbelievable. Y'all give the Lord a hand. It's unbelievable to live here. It's unbelievable. Friday nights, I stand in front of a high school football team and do a message just like I do on Sunday mornings. And that's not just the high school I'm at. That's high schools all over our community. It's crazy. Where does that happen? But that's not normal. This is nuts. So we know what we know, and you don't even hear this in the media a lot. Last week, there were 80 people killed for their faith in Nigeria. 80. Last week. Between 2005 and 2015, 900,000 Christians were martyred for their faith across the world. 900,000, 90,000 a year lost their faith because they said, I'll follow Jesus. We don't see that here. Now, we may one day, but we don't see it now. But God says, I want you to be prepared. Jesus talks about it. Paul talks about it. So whether it's just being avoided, maybe it's being accused, maybe it's being abused, what do we do? What do you and I do when we walk through that season? How do I respond to it? How do I respond with my faith to situations like that? How do we need to be preparing our kids for situations? Ready? Number 1, pray for those who are against me. Pray for those who are against me. All right, time out. That sounds like the right thing to say on Sunday morning, but how many of y'all would agree that is really hard to do? Raise your hand. It's really hard to do. Because when somebody is against us, we want to come against them. We want to come back at them. Look at what Paul said in Romans. Bless those, get this now, bless those who what you? What does he say? Bless and do not curse them. Repay no evil for evil, but give thought to do what is honorable in the sight of all. So, let's think about this for a second. If Jesus left us here, we come to know him and he left us here. What did he leave us here for? And I want you to write this under number 1. He left us here to look like him. So the question isn't, what do you want to do? The question is, what would Jesus do? That really is the question. It's not what comes natural for you. This doesn't come natural to me. It doesn't come natural to you. This is an anti-world deal here. Pray for those who are against me. Mike, that doesn't seem right. I completely agree, but it isn't about me. If I respond back the way everybody else responds back, they don't see Jesus. They only see Jesus when my response is opposite of what the world would respond. What sometimes we go, well, I never go through that. Nobody ever knows about my faith. Which makes you ask the question, why? Why would somebody not know your faith? Why would they not know you're a believer? Ladies and gentlemen, we live in a dark world. It doesn't take a lot to shine light in a dark place. Now, in a room like this, it's bright. We put a light on, you don't even see it. But when the room is dark and a light's lit up, you know it. Pray for those who persecute you. And look at what Jesus said, Luke 23. And Jesus said, Father, forgive them. They know not what they do, and they cast lots to divide his garments. That was at the cross. I remember one other story, Matthew 5:41. Back during that time, a Roman soldier could walk up to a Jew and say this, I want you to carry my bag a mile. You know what the Jew had to do? He had to take that guy's bag, and for literally 1 mile, he had to walk his bag. This is before Uber. All right? And so he had to walk his bag, and he carried it 1 mile, and then his obligation was over. You know what Jesus said? When somebody walks up to you and asks you to carry their bag a mile, carry it too. Don't look like everybody else. Don't respond like everybody else. I want them to know there's something different about you. We're jars of clay to show the surpassing greatness. Number 2. Believe God will eventually make things right. Believe that God will eventually make things right. Beloved, never avenge yourselves, but leave it to the wrath of God. For it is written, vengeance is mine, I will repay, says the Lord. Here's the hardest part of that whole deal. God's timetable and your timetable are not the same. Have y'all found that to be true? If God would consult me, I could speed things up a little bit, but he does not. He doesn't operate like I want him to. He doesn't come through like I want him to. He doesn't show up like I want him to. And there's going to be times it looks like those who hurt you or persecuted you got off scot-free. That's not your deal. That's God's deal. Now, I don't recommend quoting that to them, all right, going, vengeance is God's. All right, that's probably not going to help build a relationship. But just know that God's got it. He said he's got it. What retribution did Jesus have that those were gathered around the cross? None. He forgave them. All over this world, you're watching this happen. Jesus is telling a greater story. He's telling a greater story than the one that you and I see. Number 3, imitate Jesus by doing good in return. That's where push comes to shove, doesn't it? So if I'm going to imitate Jesus, I've got to do good in return for their bad. Look at the way Paul said it. To the contrary, if your enemy's hungry, what should you do? Help me out. If your enemy's hungry, what should you do? If he's thirsty, what should you do? By doing so, you'll heap burning coals on his head. Do not overcome evil. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with what? That's hard to do. That's hard to do. I remember a few years ago, it was in the early 2000s. We went through a real tough season here that happens, right? And y'all are going to find this. This is shocking. I know this is going to really surprise you. There was somebody who went here that didn't like me very much. Can y'all believe that? I mean, that's unbelievable, isn't it? He didn't like me at all. I'm talking like not in the least. And so, I mean, it was a tense situation. We had a very tough conversation. I remember where it was. I remember the time we met. I don't like conflict at all, but it was a very tense deal, very tense. And I figured I wasn't going to be getting any more Christmas cards from him and all those kind of things. And so it wasn't 2 weeks later, I saw him at a local ball field. And our kids were little. This is a long time ago. Our kids were little guys. And I saw him across the way at the ball field. And I remember thinking, if I avoid him now, I'll always avoid him. And I remember walking across the path, putting my arm around his shoulder and asking how he was doing and how his family was doing. And it was the last place I wanted to be. And I was like, my hand is so close to his neck. I just reach right there. This would go really well. Before God, he knows that's true. All right, and so, but you know what? Why does God want us to do that? Because when we don't, it doesn't hurt them, it hurts us. Is our world full of evil? Yes or no? So we have two options here at North Star. I got an option of standing on a soapbox every weekend, and every weekend we could pick out a different evil, right? I mean, I could just name something. We could pick it out, and we could rant and rave and preach and spit and all kinds of stuff about that evil. And guess what? That evil ain't going nowhere. Or we could overcome evil by doing good. Forgiving, loving, praying for. For some of us, it's our kids. Do you know it's harder to be a Christian student now than it's ever been? Mike, I graduated in 1990, and it was hard then. It was, but you was on a rotary phone. All right, and so it's a little different now, right? Your girlfriend went out with somebody, and you found out about it a week later. Now it pops up on your phone in a relationship. Oh, that's nice, right? It's a different world. That's why student ministry is such a big deal here. Because it isn't easy to watch your kids hurt and to watch them not fit in because of their faith. You don't want them to feel alone. I want everybody to look at me. If you live for Jesus, you're not always going to fit in this world. You can have friends, but it ain't going to be like it could have been. I remember Casey. I told the story last service. Casey was a little guy, probably elementary school, and you remember when Guitar Hero came out? Everybody remember Guitar Hero? It sort of came and went, but Guitar Hero came out, and he was really struggling. I don't think it was around middle school age. He was really struggling to fit in with some friends, and middle school years are hard. They're just hard years. In fact, we figured out the only people who really like middle school are bullies. All right, they're the only people. Everybody else is just sort of weird. It's just sort of a weird time. And so Guitar Hero comes out, and we'd gone over to the house. It was out of our neighborhood. We drove over to the house. Some friends had gathered, and they were playing Guitar Hero. And it was a group of guys he really wasn't fitting with at school. He just never clicked with anybody in middle school. And so I remember we're there, sort of protective helicopter, just checking things out, parents. Now, y'all would never do this, but we did. And so we're helicoptering around, and I actually became a attack helicopter at times. But anyways, so we're helicoptering around, checking things out. And we look, we've never seen Guitar Hero. I don't even know what it is, Guitar Hero. And there's a character on Guitar Hero named Casey Lynch, except it's Lynch, and it's a female. So we saw that, and Anne thought, I didn't see it was a female. Anne thought they had created that character to make fun of Casey. And we came home, and she cried and cried and cried. And then we found out that it was a character on Guitar Hero, and I laughed, and then I was in trouble. All right, and so that sort of persecution came to the house. But I remember that hurt we felt as parents, thinking our child was isolated. You've been there. A lot of y'all have been 10 times worse than that. Why does God tell us this through Paul? Everybody look at me. Because he called us not to live our life called us to live his. He called us to shine Jesus wherever we are with whoever we're with. Well, Mike, nobody on my team knows I live for Jesus. Why? Why do they not know that? How can they not know that? I don't think you ever have to say a word. I think your life should look so differently. Tim Tebow's a perfect example, right? And what did that guy ever say? Everybody's got to follow after him? No. He just lived his life differently. And it was like the world came against him and ostracized him from the NFL. Well, Mike, he wasn't the greatest quarterback. Tell it to his face. He's a big old dude, all right? If he was here, I'd go, Hall of Fame, man. He should have been in the Hall of Fame. He's a huge guy. But he got ostracized for his faith. We don't know that that's not going to happen to us. But here's the question. When and if it does, you living for you or you living for Jesus? Which one? If we want to make a mark in this world, the darker it gets, the brighter we get. And that's the call he put on us. Would you pray with me? Father, today this is not a fun one to talk about. And God, my understanding of persecution is pretty limited. I've had a pretty easy life. Felt left out a few times and probably picked on a few times and know that I didn't fit into some groups a few times. But God, I've never felt at risk for my faith. But God, somewhere in the world right now, somebody does. There's somebody being baptized somewhere in this world that the minute they come out of that water, they're on a hit list. Because now they claim to be a follower of Jesus. God, I pray you encourage them this morning. God, I pray that our faith's unshakable. God, when we walk through that season, which we will, God, may we not let it rattle us, but God, may we let it grow us. God, may we know, so that's what he said it was going to happen. And God, may our faith that we're living out in these jars of clay, some of us are going, man, I'm the last person God should want to use. Yeah, so am I. But yet he chooses to use us. God, may we live out our faith to the very best of our ability and be the people that you called us to be. It's in Jesus' name that I pray. Amen. Would y'all join me and let's give the Lord a hand and thank him for our time this morning. Well, what I love is while we're meeting in Kennesaw and Ackworth, all over this world, we have partnerships with ministries that are on the ground in places that it's a lot harder to live for the gospel than it is here. I want you to watch this video with me, would you? Check this out. Every year here at North Star, we have what we call Sponsorship Sunday. Why do we do this? Jesus said this phrase. He said, to whom much is given, much is required. We have been given much. Would y'all all agree with that? We have been blessed. I have a house for my car that I drive into called a garage. Most people don't even have a roof over their head across our world. These four you're going to get to meet and hear from today, they represent some ministries from India to Guatemala to Haiti to all over this world in Cambodia. It's amazing what God is doing. And so before I even introduce these guys, Tracy, you're going to get to hear from Tracy and Brian and Tanya and Steve. Would y'all give them a great North Star welcome this morning and thank them for what they do? So Tracy, God grabbed you and your husband's heart a few years ago, and you created a ministry called Saving Susan. Tell everybody where that heart came from and sort of the background of how everything got started.
Okay, thanks, Mike. First, I want to thank all the North Star community for inviting us into House of Hope Zacapa, where you support some children down there. My husband went on a mission trip for the first time at age 52, and God put a little girl in his path that he fell madly in love with. Her name was Wichika, and he couldn't pronounce it twice the same way, so he nicknamed her Susan, and it stuck. So it's not really, nothing real special there. But what God did between my husband and that little girl is really special. He came home and wanted to adopt her, and we learned that she was not able to be adopted because the borders are closed because of human trafficking. So protect these children from human trafficking by not letting them be allowed to be adopted. So we prayed and cried, and his heart was broken, but God showed us a different way. So we started Saving Susan Ministry. So we do orphan sponsorship in a real unique way. We match a family with a child, almost like an adoption, and we ask you to commit to walk alongside of them financially, but more importantly in relationship. So you use Skype to interact with your child. We take you to go meet your child, So we have that sponsorship. We also have a first step sponsorship. That may be a little scary and a little overwhelming for some people. But I know that there's people here this morning that God is already tugging on your heart about a child. And if you go with him where he's tugging you, he will blow your mind. He will reveal himself to you in ways you can't even imagine. So the other sponsorship is a monetary sponsorship, so you can sponsor a child to make sure they're going to get fed, to make sure they can get an education, which is so important. Once these children get through high school, Saving Susan Ministry raises money to put them through college or vocation school. So your financial commitment ends there. We're also teaching them music through music academies and English through Liberty University. It can help and change the life of a child, but I think more importantly, God wants to change our lives through it. It's amazing.
Amen. I love that. And I love what they're doing because you are getting to see the faces of these kids. And, you know, so many times when you hear things like this, you really never get a chance to know who the child is. Man, these are kids you may get to meet, and these people know. And they know their stories. And Brian is very similar what they're doing in Guatemala. And Brian and I go back 20 plus years, have been old friends through student ministry days in the early 90s. And man, tell them a little bit, Brian, about what you're doing now and about the partnership and what's going on down in Guatemala.
If you'd like to know more about Mike 20 years ago, see me in the
really
lobby. I'd be happy to share. I had 4 people or 3 or 4 folks come up after the first service and ask for stories. So we're thrilled to be here, Mike, with you and North Star to partner with you in creating a community-to-community ministry in Guatemala. You have the opportunity to partner relationally as a whole, but also one-on-one through sponsorship and partnership. And so we're excited to launch this. We're kind of the new player in partnership with North Star today. And so we're thrilled to enter into this relationship with you. Hope Chest has been around for about 25 years. We started in Russia in the 90s, working in orphanages. And now we serve in 7 countries around the world. We're still in Russia. We're in Moldova. We're in India, Uganda, Swaziland, Ethiopia, and certainly Guatemala, obviously, where you're partnering. And so we believe that there are 2 strategic things that really impact the life of a child and bring hope. 1 is the gospel, and 2 is education. And so we focus a lot on those 2 things in a partnership relationship. Through all of our organizations, you're going to get to sponsor a child and be in a one-on-one relationship with them. And you're also going to have the opportunity to travel and to meet them and to walk in their community and walk in their home and see where they live and see where they go to school. And so it's more than just about writing a check or sponsoring monthly. It's really about relationship. And ministry comes through relationship. And so that's one of our core values at Hope Chest, is that we want to see relationships happen over a long period of time. And ultimately through those things, through those relationships, transformation takes place. And so we're excited to be part of the North Star family now in a partnership with you, and we're thrilled to see what God's going to do over the next few years.
That's so awesome. And a lot of you guys recognize Tanya up here. Tanya's been around North Star for a long time, and it's really God has captured her heart with India. And you guys have seen some pretty incredible things go on down there. Fill everybody in a little bit, Tanya.
Okay. I have a lot of stories that I could share because I've been there 4 times. The last time I actually got to lead the trip, which was pretty exciting and scary all at the same time. But I've walked through the red light districts there and just built relationships with so many people, from creating job skill training programs to our sponsorship program. And we have 2 orphanages there that we work with. One is specifically for boys, one's for girls. And both homes are a very good Christian environment. These children have been all brought out from the red light district. So their parents, for generations and generations, parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, it's been a life of prostitution and drug trafficking and just gangs and stuff. So having them there at the Home of Hope orphanages, it's amazing how much change there has been in their lives. And one of the examples, I didn't get to share the first service, but we had a couple gals from here that are licensed cosmetologists. And so they went and they taught these girls, about a dozen girls, how just to cut a basic haircut. And that was the year before I went. When I went the second year, saw these 12 girls, and they were so proud and so excited to show us the salon that they had opened in the red light district. And they had been able to buy their freedom away from the pimps in the red light district. So their lives were completely changed. I'm gonna get emotional talking about it, but it's just, and you could see the difference. You could see the difference in their eyes and in their smiles and everything. They knew the Lord and they had hope, and their lives were completely changed.
You know, it's so funny, and I love what Sonia said, and every person up here can tell you that story. You see hope light up eyes. It is remarkable when you see what hope can do. And this creates hope. And Pastor Steve, many of you know from Haiti, and that little corner that you've got there in Port-au-Prince. Tell them what God's done there, Steve, over the past few years.
Well, thank you, Pastor Mike, and a big thank you to my North Star family. As many of you know, I was born in Haiti, actually. Left when I was a young boy. But after the earthquake, I went back to a place that I had sworn I'd never go back to. And I served for 3 years after the earthquake. But 5 years ago, I got to this community called Quadébouquet. Quadébouquet is pretty poor, and many of you who've been to Haiti can testify to this fact that it's pretty poor. I got there 3 years after the earthquake and saw families in rags, kids in dirt, living in tents. In fact, they were living right behind the church in tents, 30 square feet sags, really, and would spend the night standing up when it rains. Really brought me to tears. I'm not, a guy that's usually cry, but really to know when it rains, a bunch of people, mothers standing up with their children, holding their children, it was a sad story. But with the help of North Star, with the help of my family here, I can tell you things have changed considerably. We now have a school running of 180 kids who couldn't read, couldn't write, didn't have any hope they'd be in school because their parents could not afford them. The sad faces tell the story to watch other kids going to school, and the question is, what's wrong with me? What's wrong with my parents? But thank God, the school is running great, lives are turning around, and some of these parents that actually were living in those tents, now we've put them in respectable homes, and many of them are actually working at the school. So really, it's 180-degree turning around, thanks to you guys and thanks to God. Thank you so much.
It's so neat because education and the gospel is a big part of each of their stories, and that couldn't happen without you. You know, Jesus had a lot to say, but something Paul said and something Jesus, he was reiterating what Jesus said. We have two things that he's asked us to do. Remember, it's not about us. It's take care of the widows and take care of the orphans. We were up here earlier, for those of you in True North, but we were dedicating a handsome little boy named Knox. The thought that he would grow up in a place that doesn't have a mom and dad, or a mom and dad that don't have the ability to take care is just unbelievable. And just for a little bit every month, we get that chance to take care of these kids. Well, I know how proud I am of these guys. Would you let these guys know how proud you are of what they're doing? And thank God for them. So awesome. So I'm going to allow them now. They're going to go out to their tables out in the lobby while they're going out. So in Compass, when you get done today, if you'll head straight back through these back doors. You'll go out there true north. If you're watching, you'll go right out the lobby. If you're watching online and you're like, man, I want to do something, I just can't get there, you can type marsha.james@northstarchurch.org. Send Marsha a note, and I know our online campus, they'll put a link there. You can link right to Marsha. So I remember it was my first trip to Haiti, and I'd never seen hunger. I'd read about it, hadn't seen it. We were set up our little pharmacy, and the little kids would come in and they'd get their medicine, from the doctors, and they'd give them their prescription. And I'll never forget, this is what stands out to me. The prescription said take with 3 meals a day. They didn't eat a meal a day. They may get 1 meal, but not 3. I had never thought about that before. I grew up in Atlanta. I didn't understand what poverty looked like. I remember asking one of the doctors on the trip, she said, most of the illness here is caused by stress. What stress? They stand up every night and hold their children, and they're waiting on the next earthquake. And it's just stress. It's all stress-induced. And we get to provide hope by just a little bit. And you noticed on the video, giving up these things, and I appreciate the guys writing in the script, McDonald's once a day. I appreciate that, all right? That was directed at me. I got it, all right? I felt that. I could sponsor a village, all right, by Diet Cokes to drink. But it really doesn't cost us much. But it means everything to them. I want you to look at some of these before and afters. These are children that many of you sponsor. Look at that. It's unbelievable who they were before we got there and who they are now. That picture was taken right behind the church. I remember that before picture being taken. That was in a tent, outside a tent where they played 40 feet from the church that we sponsor down there. When you give, it makes a difference. And what I love about it, it's around $30 a month. It's something college students can do. They're like, college kids don't have $30 a month. I have 2 of them. Yes, they do. All right, and so $30 will sponsor a kid. It helps them get a meal. It helps them get education. Well, Mike, I may never meet them, and you may not. And the other great part, out in the lobbies, both lobbies, you can sign up to go on one of the trips. That's what's awesome. You can say, man, I'm sponsoring a child here in India, Guatemala, or I'm going as well to meet them. You get to meet them. But one day, imagine getting in heaven one day, $30, you don't miss it. But you meet a kid who runs up and grabs your hand and said, I never got to meet you, but I found Jesus because you. That is when it matters. And that is the church being the church. To whom much is given, much is required. Let's do it today. I think they had 350 kids. We've had 1,600 people just in here this morning. There's no reason they should have any kids left when today ends. Are you glad you came today? Would you join me and let's give the Lord a hand? It's pouring down rain outside. You don't even want to go out there. So go ahead and stand up, turn around and find somebody around you. Thank them for being here and tell them you'll see them at North Star next week. Have a great day, everybody.